Going to do some edge retention testing today with Elmax steel versus Magnacut. So we've got this Vosteed Psyop in Elmax, and we have this Chris Reeve Large inkosi drop point in Magnacut. So I've been collecting knives for over 15 years now, and I've never actually owned a knife in Elmax steel before this Psyop. Elmax was developed back in the early 90s by Bowler and was used mainly in, I believe, electronic parts and applications. In the around 2009, we started to see it in production knives more. I mainly saw it in microtechs. I had some buddies that had some of the microtechs in Elmax, and I did some sharpening for them around them, but I never actually owned and really used one. So I was excited to get my hands on some and put it up against one of the steel. So I actually put a poll out to see what steel you all wanted to see it against, and the majority voted for Magnacut, so that's what we're going to do today. So both of these are around 600 grit. They are both have right around 20-degree edge angles, so we are evenly matched there. So let's go ahead and get some initial sharpness. You can see that that is cutting very nicely through that thin magazine paper. Very nice. Look at the Chris Reeve. Very good. All right, so we'll go ahead and do some tests on the best tester just to put some numbers to it. We'll take a few tests, take an average, and then we will go out and cut some cardboard, cut some rope, do an equal amount of cuts on both, and see how those edges hold up in comparison. So a little bit of properties between Elmax and Magnacut. So Elmax has slightly more edge retention, just about like around 10% in relation to the Magnacut. Magnacut, of course, has superior toughness and corrosion resistance, so they should be pretty closely matched when it comes to actual applications in edge retention. So let's go ahead and take some tests on the best tester. Now let's test the Magnacut. All right, so the Elmax, we got an initial sharpness of 102, and for the Magnacut, we had an initial sharpness of 154. Is a pretty far jump for initial sharpness for the testing, so we're going to have to keep that in mind when we do some before and after results. However, 102 and 154 is still just about on the same scale of actual practical sharpness in the on the best tester's scale for sharpness. So we'll go ahead and go cut up some cardboard, cut up some rope, do some more testing afterwards, and see how they hold up. All right, so we did 150 cuts through cardboard and 50 cuts through the sizzle rope. I will say they both performed very similarly. The Psyop has a flat grind, and the Chris Reeve inkosi has a hollow grind, but I believe that the Psyop might come down to a little bit thinner behind the edge, but they have the same edge angles, so they did have a very similar performance. And that's great to say about this Psyop. You know, it's a knife that's the quarter of the price of this Chris Reeve, but we can still have that same amount of reliability, at least in the just some general performance for EDC with this knife. And that's one of the reasons why I do really like Vosteeds. So let's take a look at some of the post-cutting sharpness. So we've got some of the same type of paper here. So it is still cutting, but it is struggling a little bit to get through it and to get it started. It definitely doesn't feel as clean, but it is still cutting very nicely. And I suspect we will see a little bit of a drop on the best tester for sure with that. Let's take a look at the Chris Reeve in Magnacut. And it feels about the same as the Vosteed does. It feels a little rough. It's making its way through it, but it's not completely clean. I got to kind of start and stop the cut to get it to go through. So we definitely see a little bit of wear in the edge. It does maybe feel a little bit rougher than the Vosteed. Let's see if they will shave. No shaving on the Chris Reeve. Definitely could shave before. Let's try the Vosteed. No. Nope, not getting any hairs on that one now either. So we're still cutting paper. We lost our razor edge. So let's go ahead and take some measurements on the best tester, and then we will take an average. All right, so for the before cutting average of the Elmax, again, was 102, and that average went up to 247, or an increase of 145 grams of pressure to cut that line on average. Now, the Magnacut on the Chris Reeve started at 154, and that went up to an average of 201 for an increase of 47 grams to cut the line. Now, that on paper with this best tester seems like it's 3 times the level of edge retention on Magnacut over Elmax, and that's even though on paper Elmax has a little bit more wear resistance or edge retention on Larrin Thomas's style of charts. So what could that mean? How could that happen? Now we see that cutting paper, they both seemed pretty even. Neither of them shave anymore. Well, that could be the best tester. The best tester just looks at just straight push cutting. So if if one of them maintained more teeth than the other one, but still rounded out some, then we could still do things like cut paper easily, but it would show a drop on the best tester. Now, I think also it could be that Chris Reeve's Magnacut is heat treated to, I think between 62, 64, 63, or 64 Rockwell, and I believe that does put Magnacut in a higher tier of edge retention than what we may see as a standard on the charts. Now, that could also be that Vosteed's treatment of the Elmax isn't optimal as well. But either way, we can see that Chris Reeve's Magnacut does outperform the Elmax on the Vosteed Psyop pretty clearly, 3 times over, which I'm pretty surprised about. Usually when we get 2 steels that are that close on paper, they are that close in performance as well. So this ended up being a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. Regardless, I'm still very happy with the way both of these knives performed. I still do very much will use and continue to enjoy the Vosteed Psyop. It is still a great knife, and for all intents and purposes, it can still cut just fine. Still pretty close to the Chris Reeve. But the difference between 201 and 207 on the best tester chart is still pretty close. That's still a very sharp, usable edge either way. But again, hope you found these results interesting. Thank you for watching.